to the fourth segment of today's show here on the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast. We are moving from more of a rankings and bettings perspective to a more fantasy football perspective, because that is what this show is all about. But also, I kind of feel like flex options don't get talked about often enough. You understand? And the reason why I love flex options so much is that these are the guys who can sneakily get you a lot of fantasy points. And the four guys that I have on my list right here are all guys who performed very well last week. All guys who I think, if you give them the opportunity, can potentially be that guy that gets you a lot of points. Me personally, I don't have anyone of note on my team who is like four of these guys mentioned, but at the end of the day, at every single position, I'll give you a guy who I think will keep you on schedule. So let's get on with it. The first guy had a very big game in his new home, and I think that he will continue to be able to produce in this offense as well. Now, that's J.K. Dobbins, and it's pretty simple. He's only getting the Panthers. And not to, harp on picking teams and players against the Panthers, but come on. The run defense just got a big hit. Derek Brown suffering a season-ending injury. And J.K. Dobbins, really looks very comfortable in this Jim Harbaugh system. I thought the main worry there was that coming over from a system where his explosiveness was needed in that Greg Roman offense in Baltimore, and moving to Jim Harbaugh's system where he needs to be a little bit more timely and really be more of a workhorse, and also combining that with his injury history, I thought that might cause a little bit of an issue and cause me to be skeptical about him. But no, he's one of the best running back performers in fantasy. And at 22.9 points, he's someone who I feel like can start even as well. Maybe as an RB2 in a deeper league. So look out for J.K. Dobbins to be a guy, especially against the Panthers, who will wreak havoc this weekend. And then when I go to the wide receiver position, we talked about this guy a little bit earlier in today's show. Rashid Shaheed. Rashid Shaheed, yes, I don't think this game will be very pretty for the Saints offense, but Rashid Shaheed profiles as someone who might be able to get open in certain situations. And so, looking at the overall perspective of what the Saints might want to do against teams that they might not necessarily have to win against to get into the playoffs, but teams that are far superior to them in the NFC, is just rely on the deep ball. I think that Derek Carr's deep ball is heavily underestimated right now as one that really gets under-respected a lot, and I think that a lot of people expect it to decline at some point, but it is simply the best part of this offense. And Rashid Shaheed last week, 16.3 fantasy points, had a beautiful touchdown on that deep ball. So I think that if they want to stay alive in this game and you want someone who potentially can be a deep threat, get you a lot of yardage in terms of fantasy production, then Rashid Shaheed could be your guy. I think that it's going to have to be a week-by-week thing because we really can't glean that much from the Saints offense off of a performance against one of the weakest defenses in the league and then one of the strongest defenses in the league. We might want them to face, say, the Falcons in their own division or the Bucks to see and really say how we can refine the Saints offense. But for now, Rashid Shaheed remains an intriguing option for you in terms of flex because he's someone who doesn't necessarily profile as a wide receiver 1 or 2 in my opinion, but can add some value as a deep threat. And then, of course, the darling, perhaps, of this last fantasy weekend here, Isaiah Likely. And yes, I think that Isaiah Likely's production largely depends on the Ravens' game flow and whether or not they want to maintain a run game with Derrick Henry or, pass the football. And it all also depends on the O-line, right? Because that O-line was one of the more skeptical parts of this offense in that game. So I think that if you want to develop a passing game, and be able to move the chains for the passing game, you're going to need a guy like Isaiah Likely. I think that the best parts of what I saw out of the Ravens offense last week was those little screen action passes to Justice Hill, and then of course Isaiah Likely emerging as a target for Lamar Jackson. So I think that at the end of the day, keeping that balance in the Baltimore Ravens offense might mean that we see less of Isaiah Likely, but in the moments that he's on the field, I think that he ultimately will profile as someone that Lamar Jackson can look to, especially, if Lamar Jackson has to work out of structure. So, again, I think that he's also a week-by-week guy, but 26.1 fantasy points last week. Definitely, if you're not thinking of him as a starter, which I think he could be as the season goes on, then that's definitely a positive part of the flex option for you. And then the last one here, we talked about this guy as a quarterback going into this game. This could definitely change week by week because I know him as a Seahawks fan as someone to be very volatile in his play, especially in fantasy purposes, and that is Geno Smith. And I'm not as confident now as I was when I wrote this in terms of putting Geno Smith as a flex option, and he's definitely someone who's a deeper league or a 2 QB league kind of thing. So the thing about Geno that I do like, though, is that at any given moment he can give you the highest high and also the lowest low. That's what I mean in terms of flex for a quarterback here. He had that beautiful kind of mazy 34-yard run in that game, but also threw an ugly pick in the first possession of that game. So he's definitely a mixed bag in terms of the QB position. But if you're in a 2 QB league, like I said, in a deeper league, even in a dynasty league or something of that nature, Geno Smith might be a fun guy to play around with week by week. These are the 4 guys that I really came off the top of my head based off of their last performances that I really